Next up, we're going to take a look at the articulation or opposability. You've heard the same song and dance who knows how many times, so let's just go ahead and onto it. First, let's take a look at the Playmates, because that's a bit more easier to go over. The Playmates has a, fixing the focus on my camera here, it has a fixed neck. No, there is not a joint. I know it advertises that you can twist it, but trust me, you do not want to twist it. The reason why is because I think it's best explained on the HIYA Godzilla, is that the this Godzilla sculpt actually is plugged into the body on a big square peg. Now, at first glance, that might seem like, okay, I can just rotate it diagonally. No. Basically what that means is that it's all squared off, and if it was a circle, yeah, you can get it to rotate, but guess what? It's not. If you try rotating it, you'll kind of see the seam line here. See that? That is starting to split because of it moving. So ultimately, if you do that too far, you're going to end up breaking and snapping that joint right off. Or over time, you're going to eventually degrade the rubber on this big square peg. And yeah, you're going to have a broken Godzilla figure, which I don't recommend. We have a hinge at the jaw, which I think is pretty much self-explanatory with all NECAs and Monster Arts and HIYA Toys figures nowadays. You have swivel joints here at the shoulders, not much in the elbow or wrists, nothing in the waist. The leg goes back and forth. In a fixed position, it is stepping forward. So as far as posability, you're not going to get much out of it. You can go this far forward, maybe kick someone, go back a bit as if you're about to charge a kick. Same thing with this leg, although it is a bit more accurately posed, quote unquote. But it has, it can only go up that far and go backwards about that far. There's nothing at the feet, because again, much like the legs, they're plugged in onto the body on a big square peg. So again, I do not recommend that. And for the tail, there's one big ball joint here at the base of the tail, which can go down about that far, up about that far, to the left about, without rotating it, about that far, to the right about, again, without rotating it, that far, and can actually rotate all the way around, go pretty much wherever you want it to go. And there's no bendy wire here, but it is made of a pliable rubber. So I assume that if you wind up with a version like mine, you could possibly put this whole thing in boiling water, put this in like a pre-positioned pose, freeze it or whatever, let it cool down, and then it'll work like a charm. So that is it for the Playmates Godzilla posability. Next, let's talk about the HIYA Godzilla. And something the HIYA Godzilla. Something I failed to mention in my previous review, at least I think I don't remember mentioning it precisely. But we'll actually talk about that. The hinge jaw goes like that. Hinge at the tongue, although do keep in mind if you have it lowered, you close the jaw, open it up again, the tongue will be raised back up. It's just how it works. Now, at first glance, the head and neck seems to be multiple segments, right? Wrong. Technically speaking. The original 2021 Godzilla had multiple segments, and back here was actually a ball hinge joint that allowed you to get some extra mileage out of the head. However, on the 2019 figure, they changed it, and they actually had a barbell-style ball joint that's reminiscent of the NECA 1994 Godzilla. Anyone that owns that figure knows that when you pop the head off and pop off the neck sleeve, the neck itself is just a big sleeve to cover a big peg that goes from here to here, and everything else is just in between free floating. Also kind of reminds you of the SH Monster Arts Kamada-kun from the Kamada-kun and Shinagawa-kun Form 1 and Form 2 Shin Godzilla form packs, which that one actually had an additional joint in there, which I think, if I remember correctly, was supposed to be a scrapped joint from the neck segment, like midway through. I mean, Shinagawa Kamada-kun has got a very long neck, so I'm surprised they didn't even, leave out that joint or whatever. But like I was saying, there's three free floating neck pieces that go to cover the gaps. And as far as the range, comfortably you can get it about up to there and comfortably down here. You can get it a little bit more down, but keep in mind when you do that, you'll start to get a little bit of gappage, and because of the way the head's positioned, the top part here will actually interlock with the gap there, so you got to MacGyver it so it looks a bit more flush to the overall body, and I think you all missed that. Here it is for replay value. There we go. See how it is a little lower than where it meets the gap? Yeah, you want to like MacGyver it just so it doesn't get caught in between. For the shoulders, they are on ball joints, so you're able to go in and out, forward and back. Pretty much do whatever you want. Ball joints at the elbows, pretty much hinge joint at the elbows, pretty self-explanatory. Oh wow, completely missing that. And as well as rotation. Ball joints at the wrist. No swivel hinge, it's just all ball joint. So you can get a good amount of range there. Let's actually lower the camera down a bit. The waist has a decent amount of range, so you can actually go a bit forward and back, side to side, a little tilt. I wouldn't recommend doing it far because, again, you get the gappage, which I think that's something that the NECA definitely has over the HIYA. But again, we're not talking about the NECA one right now, we're talking about the HIYA. So it only has one joint, no dual joint like the Monster Arts. Going down to the hips. The hips are definitely the most expressive part of the figure. Debatably, as we'll see in a sec. Posing the arms upward. They're similar to the Monster Arts and the NECA in that they're able to go in and out, forward and back, but they also have like sculpted in brains, so it actually looks somewhat flush and natural. You can get a pretty good rotation. I don't know if you can go all the way around. Oh, you definitely can. Oh, wow, that is beautiful. Let's rotate that back, shall we? Oh, yeah. So, next we got a hinged knee. Dual hinge, actually. Here and here. That can go a bit in and out. Ball joint at the foot, which is somewhat good with range. Can rotate a bit. And has 9 joints across the entirety of the tail. So you can get a good amount of range here. Good amount of range there. Go not that far down, but can go decently up. It's mostly the side to side range, and ultimately it goes for a very organic feel in my opinion. So when we go to a pretty much a standstill here, honestly, looking at both figures, well, on their own, of course, the HIYA, in my opinion, gives a lot of good things about it, and I like it. I like the head posability. Granted, I do think that if you bend it a little downward, because keep in mind, Godzilla, the Monster vs. Godzilla does tend to look down a lot, assuming he's not face-to-face with King Ghidorah. He definitely does have that sort of MacGyver, especially because he's in the movie facing a much more smaller opponent. You want him to be looking downward, and that might be a bit tricky with Kong. That being said, there's also not too much bending. I mean, you can get it to bend, it's just not that much range. So, as far as range goes, I mean, at least this has the possibility to pull something like that off. Unlike I didn't really expect it. But, of course, overall, I definitely think that there are some things that could be improved. Like, for example, maybe a bit more range on the legs. The tail could use a bit more up and down. The arms are fine, honestly. Maybe like a bicep joint or something. And I definitely think the head joint is fine on its own, too. And I also love the way that the jaw itself moves, because you can also pose the tongue individually with the jaw. The Playmates. Again, this is standard. But I personally feel like this should have at least had an actual head swivel or foot swivel, because if you want to be technical here, this figure, which the Playmates Shin Godzilla V1 had exactly what I was looking for. A swivel at the head and swivel at the feet. Granted, it's not the best quality, not by a large margin, not by a small margin, but a gargantuan margin. Sorry. But that being said, if Playmates could give it to us on a relatively worse figure than this, and not to mention they also did that with the 2014 only a few years later, why didn't they give it to us here? Honestly, I have no idea. But as far as like rating goes, I'm going to have to give the articulation on this a 7.5. I'm really considering an 8. Screw it, I'll just doctor to an 8. This, it's fine. It's reminiscent of a Bandai vinyl. Everyone likes vinyls. I'm going to give 7.5 to this. Because, again, I feel like the foot and the head swivels should have been there. They really should have. Big square pegs, no point.